Chapter 1. The Proposal. He couldn't escape. The rain outside was soft, steady, and perfectly timed, as if the universe itself knew Kalen Rinford was in no mood for disruptions. The sharp clack of leather shoes echoed across the marble floors of Rinford Industries as Kalen strode into the boardroom. His dark eyes swept over the gathered executives with disinterest, and the tailored black suit on his tall frame only added to his intimidating presence. He was a man who had climbed his way to power with logic, control, and cold precision. Emotions were liabilities. Attachments, even worse. And yet, as he approached the head seat, he saw something on the long glass table that made his brows furrow. A file, thick, embossed, crimson. And the name on the folder made his stomach twist in an oddly unfamiliar way. Varel. He flipped it open and scanned the first few lines. His heart dropped. A marriage proposal? Explain, now. His voice was low and dangerous, like the calm before a thunderstorm. One of the board members, an older alpha named Herrick, cleared his throat nervously. The Varel family sent it directly. It's a formal proposal of alliance, through marriage, between you and their heir. I'm not marrying some Enigma prince for politics, Kalen said sharply, already pushing the file back. We're not in the 1800s. Herrick hesitated. It's not just some prince. It's Syl Varel. Kalen paused. Syl. The name hit him like a hidden tripwire. Soft, delicate, out of place in this world of power and ambition, a name he hadn't heard in over a decade. And yet it lingered, burned somewhere in the quieter parts of his memory. Back in high school. That quiet, awkward Omega. Wide silver eyes, always watching him from across the room. Kalen used to tease him. Nothing cruel, just light jabs and smirks that always made Syl flush or pout. For reasons he never bothered to question back then, Kalen had liked the way Syl reacted to him. Gentle, submissive, a little scared, yet never fully avoiding him. Syl, he repeated, more to himself than the room. Yes, Herrick nodded. He's now known as Silas Varel, inheritor of the Viril dynasty. He requested the union personally. Kalen's jaw tensed. I said no. But I said no. The discussion should have ended there, but it didn't. A week passed. And Kalen discovered that saying no to the Virils meant absolutely nothing. The board had unanimously voted to accept the alliance behind his back. His stocks began shifting under pressure from Enigma firms aligned with Varel power. His largest competitor suddenly pulled out of 3 joint ventures. And then, the invitation arrived. Or rather, a summons. You are requested to meet with Silas Varel for the formal finalization of the union. Attendance is non-negotiable. His blood boiled. Non-negotiable, huh? Kalen muttered, crushing the envelope in his hand. But when he arrived at the Varel estate dressed in anger and tailored Armani, everything changed. Because the man waiting for him was not the shy, nervous Syl he remembered. He was taller now, sleek, predatory, dressed in a dark jade suit that complemented his pale skin and silver blonde hair, which fell just past his ears in soft waves. His eyes, once shy and darting, were now sharp, unwavering, and glowing faintly with a shimmer of Enigma power. And when Silas Varel smiled at him, Kalen froze, because there was something wrong about it. It wasn't cold, it wasn't mocking, it was worshipful. Like a man who had finally caught a star he had chased his entire life. Kalen, Silas said smoothly, walking closer. His voice was deeper now, velvet over knives. I'm so glad you came. Kalen took a step back automatically, unsettled by the intensity in those eyes. You're Syl? He asked, throat tighter than expected. Silas tilted his head. I used to go by that name, yes. I preferred it when you said it. Kalen blinked. Why me? Out of everyone? This isn't a coincidence. Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past Kalen, close enough that their shoulders brushed, a teasing proximity, an intentional touch. His scent, crisp, rare, slightly addictive, lingered in the air. No, Silas finally murmured. It's not a coincidence. I've waited years for this. And now that you're finally within reach, I'm not letting go. Kaylin's stomach twisted. Something felt off. The air between them hummed with tension, but it wasn't the usual business kind. It was intimate. Personal. Possessive. I didn't agree to this, Kaylin growled, stepping back, trying to reclaim his space. Silas smiled again, unbothered, as if indulging a child. You will, he said. You just don't know it yet. That night, Kaylin couldn't sleep. He kept seeing those silver eyes, that smile, that devotion. And for the first time in years, he felt like the prey. Chapter 2. The Scent of Surrender. Kaylin Rinford had weathered hostile takeovers, corporate betrayals, and even assassination attempts by rivals in the dark alpha world of business. But nothing had prepared him for Silas Varel in his bathrobe, making tea in his kitchen at 6 a.m. like he'd always lived there. You're in my house, Kaylin growled. Silas looked up from the kettle, utterly unbothered. Our house now. No, mine. I didn't invite you here. A smile curved on Silas's lips. You didn't need to. The marriage contract states cohabitation begins before the ceremony for compatibility. Kaylin pinched the bridge of his nose. You made that clause up. Did I? Silas tilted his head, feigning innocence, though his eyes gleamed with mischief. Must have slipped into the fine print. Damn the virile lawyers. Damn him. But what rattled Kaylin most wasn't Silas's smug elegance or his infiltration of Kaylin's life. It was the way his scent wrapped around the house. Fresh pine and dark plum, with a hint of something deeper, forbidden and addictive. It clung to the sheets, coated the air. Kaylin could smell him in his study, on the towels, even on his pillow. It made something low in his body ache, something ancient and unspoken. He hated it. He wanted it. Over the next few days, Kaylin tried everything: cold shoulders, silent treatment, locking doors. Silas took it all with an infuriating patience that made Kaylin's blood boil. And yet, each touch was deliberate. When Silas handed him his coffee, his fingers always brushed Kaylin's. When they sat across the table, Silas's knee would press lightly against his, under the polished surface. At night, Kaylin would find his gaze drifting to the silhouette outside the bedroom balcony. Silas leaning on the railing, moonlight kissing his pale hair, like a prince from some myth who had been cursed to wait centuries for his beloved. It was getting harder to breathe, harder to sleep, harder to stop thinking about him. One night, it became unbearable. Kaylin stormed out of his office only to find Silas sprawled on the living room couch, reading one of Kaylin's favorite books, glasses perched on his nose. He looked up, smiled. Chapter 14. The part where the lead finally realizes he's in love. Kaylin tensed. You're impossible. Silas stood slowly, walking to him. His robe parted slightly at the collar, revealing the graceful curve of his throat, where faint glowing markings shimmered beneath pale skin, the dormant bond mark of an enigma, waiting. You keep resisting me, Silas murmured. But you react every time I get close. I don't, Kaylin said, voice tight. You do, Silas whispered, stepping closer. Your pulse jumps. Your scent shifts. You look at my mouth when you think I'm not watching. Kaylin clenched his jaw. This isn't real. Whatever game you're playing, this isn't a game to me, Silas said, his voice now soft, solemn. You think I'm doing this for power? For business? His eyes glowed slightly, the way only an enigma's could, ancient, otherworldly, knowing. I've waited for you for years, Kaylin. I disguised myself as an Omega in high school so I could stay near you without scaring you away. I knew you were my mate from the first time you smirked at me in class. Kaylin's breath caught. And I waited, patiently, quietly, while you rose to power and I watched from the shadows. I didn't come back into your life to dominate it. I came to complete it. Kaylin's body trembled with restraint from anger, confusion, or arousal. He couldn't even tell anymore. Why now? Silas smiled faintly. Because now, you're finally at the edge of breaking. The marriage ceremony was as opulent as the world expected, from two of the most powerful elites in society. Gold-threaded silks, chandelier-lit halls, ancient Enigma customs woven into modern luxury. Kaelin stood tall beside Silas, stoic and grim in black velvet, refusing to let anyone see the whirlwind within him. He was still grumpy, still tsundere, but Silas? Silas was radiant. Draped in deep emerald and obsidian, with the virile crest glowing against his chest, he smiled through the entire ceremony like he'd won the universe. And in his mind, he had. That night, the moonlight spilled across the bedroom floor like a blessing. Kaelin sat stiffly at the edge of the bed, arms crossed, back tense. "I'm not sleeping in the same bed," he muttered. "You already have," Silas said, closing the door behind him slowly. "Every night since I moved in." That was before the ceremony. "Then let this be our first night as mates." Silas approached with that same calm, predatory grace. Not threatening, not fast, just inevitable. Kaelin opened his mouth to argue and froze when Silas knelt before him on the bed, lifted his chin and whispered, "Let me mark you, Kaelin. Not to control you, to claim what's already mine." The air shifted. The bond trembled like it knew its time had come. Kaelin's body betrayed him, leaning ever so slightly forward, eyelids fluttering. "I haven't said yes," he whispered hoarsely. "You don't need to," Silas replied, eyes glowing softly. "Your soul already has." He leaned in slowly, gave Kaelin every chance to shove him away. But Kaelin didn't move. And when Silas's lips brushed his neck, followed by the slow press of fangs, Kaelin shuddered. The bite was gentle, the mark burning, and then pleasure, spreading like wildfire under skin. The bond surged alive, glowing across Kaelin's neck and down his spine, not yet consummated, but irrevocably joined. When Silas pulled back, his mouth stained red and reverent, he held Kaelin's face between his hands and whispered, "Now no one else will ever touch you. You're mine." Kaelin panted softly, dazed, the burn of the bond still thrumming through him. And for once, he didn't fight it. He didn't say a word. Because somewhere deep in his alpha soul, something ancient and primal had whispered back, "Finally." Chapter 3. Cracks in the Armor. Kaelin Rinford wasn't used to waking up tangled in warmth. He was used to empty beds, cold mornings, and the silence of success, polished, clean, and untouched by emotion. But now, every morning started with the weight of Silas's presence. A warm breath brushing his neck. A strong arm draped over his waist. And that infernal, intoxicating scent that lingered on his skin like an addictive drug. Dark plum, pine, and something deeper, something only his. The bond pulsed faintly each time Silas was near. It hummed when Silas touched him. It thrummed when Silas smiled. It ached when Silas stepped too far away. And it was driving Kaelin insane. He tried to keep his guard up. He avoided looking at Silas too long, refused to respond to soft gestures like breakfast made just the way he liked it, ties fixed with tender fingers, or soft, "come home safe" murmured before board meetings. He kept telling himself this is manipulation, a seduction tactic, a game. But deep down, he already knew it wasn't a game to Silas. Silas didn't demand love. He didn't pressure, guilt, or force. Instead, he earned it. Day by day, gentle persistence, thoughtful touches, quiet protection. When Kaelin came home tense after a 16-hour meeting, Silas drew him a bath without a word. Didn't speak, just lit candles and left him alone. When Kaelin had a nightmare from memories he'd buried, Silas didn't wake him with questions. He simply pulled him close and held him through the shaking. And when Kaelin snapped at him in frustration, "Stop acting like you care so much," Silas only looked at him calmly and said, "I care more than you're ready to accept. I always have." One night, Kaelin returned home late. The Varel mansion was quiet. Silas wasn't in the living room, not in the garden, not in the study. He found him in the guest room, curled asleep with a blanket and a book on his chest. For the first time, Kaelin's chest tightened at the sight. He stood at the doorway too long. Long enough to admit, quietly in his own head, that he missed Silas in their bed. But he didn't say anything. Instead, he walked away, shut the door softly, and laid awake in a cold bed that felt far emptier than he expected. The next day, Silas didn't press him. He smiled gently like he knew but wouldn't speak it aloud. That made it worse. Because the more Silas waited for Kaylin to love him back, the more Kaylin started to. Against his will, against his pride. He noticed things. The way Silas flinched just barely when Kaylin ignored his hand. The way his scent turned sharper with worry when Kaylin came home with bruised knuckles after a boardroom brawl. The way Silas always knew what Kaylin needed before Kaylin even asked. He cooked Kaylin's favorite dishes when he was grumpy. He left flowers on Kaylin's desk when he had interviews. He touched him with such devastating gentleness that it burned through Kaylin's walls like wildfire. And worst of all, it was working. Kaylin didn't want him. Didn't want to need him. But one afternoon, at a corporate banquet, Kaylin saw Silas talking to a foreign investor laughing, head tilted, eyes gleaming, and something dark flared in his chest. He stalked over, wrapped an arm around Silas's waist. "What are we discussing?" he said coldly, his gaze locked on the man. Silas's eyes widened slightly. "Just wine pairings." "Find a better conversation," Kaylin snapped, "with someone else." The investor blinked and excused himself. Silas turned to Kaylin, brows raised. "Jealous, are we?" "No," Kaylin said, pulling his hand back. "You're mine, that's all." Silas said, smile tugging. "Say that again." Kaylin glared. "Don't push it." But Silas was beaming, not smug, just quietly happy, like that single moment meant everything to him. And maybe it did. Later that night, Kaylin stepped out of the shower and found Silas already in bed, reading. He stood at the doorway, damp towel slung low on his hips, tension thick in his shoulders. "Why do you keep trying so hard?" he asked. Silas looked up. "Because I want to be loved by the one who was fated for me." Kaylin's voice was hoarse. "Even if he doesn't love you back?" Silas smiled. "He will. He already does. He just hasn't admitted it to himself yet." Kaylin didn't answer. But he climbed into bed beside him. Closer than before. And when Silas shifted just slightly, Kaylin didn't move away, didn't scowl, didn't deny that maybe, just maybe, he wanted to be held. That night, as Silas tucked him close and kissed his forehead, Kaylin closed his eyes and let himself breathe in his scent like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He wouldn't say it yet, wouldn't call it love. But he didn't push Silas away. And that, in Silas's eyes, was enough for now. Chapter 4. Yours, always and without mercy. 1 year. 12 full moons since the ink dried on the contract that tied Kaylin Renford to Silas Varel. 365 days since Silas marked him. On the neck, in their bedroom, with a kiss that was more vow than victory. And even now, Silas hadn't changed. Still patient, still devoted, still maddeningly, possessively his. Their mornings were still chaotic. Kaylin would stumble into the kitchen with a frown, bleary-eyed from too many spreadsheets and too little sleep, only to find Silas humming softly as he plated their breakfast like a Michelin chef preparing for a date night. "You're smiling too much," Kaylin would grumble. "And you're still pretending you don't love it," Silas would respond, slipping behind him to wrap his arms around his waist and nuzzle the spot just below his ear. Kaylin would sigh, loudly, but he never pulled away. And when Silas would leave for meetings, Kaylin always muttered a soft, "Don't skip meals," under his breath. Silas never missed a single one. They bickered like seasoned warriors. Over bed sheets, over ties, over which wine to pair with dinner, over why Silas bought another 12 rare wolf hair rugs to soften the ambience. But every night, without fail, they still ended up in the same bed. Entangled, breathing in sync. With Kaylin sometimes pressing his nose to Silas's chest when he thought the other was asleep. Silas always noticed. But he never said a word. Just held him tighter. Kaylin would never admit it aloud, but he was happy. The man who once scoffed at the idea of fate now found himself silently reaching out in the dark for the warmth of the one person who never let go. He was still grumpy, still blunt, still fiercely guarded. But around Silas, he didn't need the armor anymore. Not everything was soft and safe, though. The world had started to notice how vulnerable Kalen had become. Not emotionally, but strategically. Enemies of the Rinford Empire, jealous conglomerates, bitter old rivals, had begun to whisper, to plot. He's an alpha marked by an enigma. He's bound. We can use that. They tried. They really did. The first attack was subtle. A poisoned deal at a summit. Kalen clutched his throat mid-toast, his body buckling. Silas caught him before he hit the floor, eyes like obsidian frost. For 3 days, Kalen was unconscious. And for 3 days, Silas vanished. When Kalen awoke, pale and disoriented, in a sealed private clinic, he asked groggily, "What happened?" Silas, sitting beside him with his usual gentle smile, stroked his hair back and said, "No one will dare try that again." Kalen found out later in hushed whispers. An entire board of executives from their rival firm had mysteriously disappeared. The ones who were found were unrecognizable, frozen to death in an abandoned high-rise, Silas owned in the outskirts. Rumor had it they'd begged for mercy. Silas had given them none. The second attempt was bolder. A car bomb planted in Kalen's personal vehicle. Only it wasn't Kalen who stepped into it. It was a body double, scheduled to swap vehicles last minute due to a mysterious shift in Silas's calendar. The footage leaked. Silas standing before the smoking wreckage, suit pristine, eyes molten. He turned to the press cameras and said in a voice laced with steel and love, "Anyone who lays a hand on my husband should prepare to lose theirs, and everything else they've ever loved." It became known, after that, Kalen Rinford wasn't just Silas Verrill's husband. He was the one precious thing an enigma, no, this enigma, would raise kingdoms for. Their marriage didn't change. If anything, it deepened. Silas returned from his trips with gifts, some lavish, some laughably small. A custom-tailored suit in Kalen's favorite shade of blue. A preserved orchid Silas found growing on a cliffside. A photo of their high school yearbook page framed, with Sil Rinford scribbled in ink under Kalen's photo. Kalen rolled his eyes. "You're ridiculous." But he hung the photo on his office wall. Some nights, Kalen stood at the balcony of their shared penthouse. The city glittered below, alive and burning with ambition. Silas would join him, wrap a blanket around both of them, and ask, "Would you still choose me if I weren't fated to you?" And Kalen, grumpy, Tsundere, always resisting, would grunt, "You ask too many stupid questions." But sometimes, just sometimes, he would rest his head against Silas's shoulder and mutter, "I don't think I'd survive anyone else." They hadn't consummated the bond yet, not physically, but their lives were stitched together in every other way that mattered. Silas never rushed him. And Kalen didn't mind the wait. Because in the quietest, softest, most hidden part of himself, he was already his. Chapter 5. Our Forever Begins Now. It started with a plan, a quiet one, woven into the days Silas had watched Kalen slowly fall in love with him, not with the obsession of their youth, but the steady, beautiful bloom of trust and affection. He never said it outright, but Silas saw it in every softened glare, every unguarded smile, every time Kalen leaned into his touch without realizing it. Kalen was his. Finally, completely, willingly his. And Silas was ready. For more. For their heir. For a future stitched with both power and family. He didn't force anything. No, Silas never forced. He invited. With candlelit dinners, drawn baths, the rare nights where he didn't touch Kalen with hands but with eyes, full of reverence and restraint, he let Kalen lead. Until one quiet evening, beneath silk sheets and flickering amber light, Kalen turned into him, placed a trembling hand on Silas's chest, and whispered, "I love you." Silas froze. Not because he didn't expect it, but because hearing it felt like the world itself had stilled, just to let those words exist. Kaylin didn't look away, didn't take it back. "I've loved you for a while now," he mumbled. I'm terrible at saying it." "You don't have to say it again," Silas said, voice barely audible. "You've been showing me all along." And that night, they finally consummated their bond. It wasn't frantic or rushed. It was slow, intimate, deep. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was an echo of years spent longing and waiting. When Silas bit down on Kaylin's shoulder to deepen their bond, Kaylin only clutched him tighter, gasping his name like a prayer. 2 months later, Kaylin threw up 3 times in a morning meeting. He insisted it was the seafood. Silas, with a small amused smile, said nothing. The doctor confirmed it within the hour. Kaylin Rinford was pregnant, with an Enigma's child. His reaction? Disbelief, staring, then pacing the penthouse in a storm of emotions. "I'm an alpha," he growled. "How can this—" "You're my alpha," Silas interrupted softly, kneeling before him and resting his head against Kaylin's still flat stomach. "And you're carrying our future." Kaylin's heart ached and soared at the same time. From that day on, Silas became a different kind of dangerous. Still powerful, still terrifying in the boardroom. But with Kaylin, he was softness incarnate, fiercely gentle, protective, devoted, territorial in ways that made every other dominant shifter back off without a word. When Kaylin's scent spiked with discomfort during an event, Silas growled so low that the windows rattled. When Kaylin complained about aching feet, Silas carried him to bed without letting him argue. When Kaylin cried over a commercial about puppies, Silas simply wiped his tears and kissed his forehead without laughing once. Kaylin would visit Silas at his office sometimes, waddling in with a scowl and swollen feet, demanding foot rubs and mango slices. Silas would drop everything, literally. Board meeting? Cancelled. International deal? Delayed. "My husband is here," Silas would say. "He is my empire now." Kaylin always rolled his eyes, but he never stopped visiting. And then, the night came. Their daughter didn't arrive in silence. No, she came screaming into the world, lungs strong, fists curled, voice demanding attention just like her parents. Kaylin was exhausted, drenched in sweat and barely holding himself together when he first heard her cry. But the moment they placed her in his arms, he wept. Not from pain, from love, from awe, from the overwhelming feeling of something greater than himself. Silas stood beside him, still in a 3-piece suit he hadn't taken off, his eyes wet and wide. "She's perfect," he whispered, kneeling to press a kiss to Kaylin's temple and then their daughter's tiny forehead. "Just like you." They named her Tsundere Bottom Rinford. It meant star. She had Kaylin's eyes and Silas's smile. And from the moment she was born, the world shifted again. Their nights were no longer quiet, but filled with tiny cries, lullabies, and the smell of milk and warmth. Their mornings were chaotic in a new way. Silas learned how to swaddle with military precision. Kaylin became a master of interpreting baby gurgles like business proposals. And in between diapers and naps, they found themselves falling even deeper. One morning, Kaylin woke up before the sun. He turned to find Silas asleep, one arm wrapped protectively around both him and Tsundere, who had snuck into their bed again. Kaylin watched them. His family. His home. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he had anything left to run from. He leaned over, kissed Silas's jaw, then whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Silas murmured, half asleep, "I never will." The Enigma's hidden bond ends not with a twist or a cliffhanger, but with a family. A powerful Enigma, a once stubborn alpha, and their daughter who would someday rule empires. Together. Always.